Yo, what is up everyone, zKarmaa here, and welcome back to another boring math video here in Borderlands 3. Today we are going to be revisiting the Cyber Spike Anointment, so consider this video a part 2. In this video, I'll be doing a brief breakdown of what I talked about in the previous video, and along with this, there will be a few talking points that I actually left out. These new things I'm going to mention are actually pretty awesome, so make sure to watch all the way through. If you haven't watched my first video on this anointment, feel free to check it out. I will leave it linked in a pinned comment below. So anyways, let's just get straight into it. In my previous video, we talked about the fact that this anointment requires you to have your weapon equipped at the start and at the end of your action skill in order for it to actually work. We also showed that the damage of the spike is going to tick for 272 constant damage, and when it explodes, it's going to do 128,000. And what I failed to mention in my previous video is that this damage can actually be altered by doing several different things. So first off, for the tick damage, you can actually increase your grenade damage in order to increase that constant damage. And as for the explosion, you can have splash damage, AoE damage, and splash radius that are all going to affect this explosion. So, quick example, we were doing 272 damage as our tick damage, right? Well, how about I increase my grenade damage by 25% with this modifier. So when I increase the ticked damage of 272 by 25%, I end up getting 340 damage. As for the explosion, let's go ahead and equip this skill right here called the Arms Deal, which is going to increase my splash damage by 20%. So 128k times 1.2 is 153.6k, which is actually going to be rounded up to 154k. So we're going to do 154k for the explosion and 340 for every little tick of damage. So let's go ahead and test this out. And as you can see, let's use it on this guy right there. And you see those 340s, and on explosion, there's the 154k. Now, very quickly, I wanted to mention that in my previous video, I also said that you cannot fake grasp with Amara in order to activate this anointment. Well, you can actually do it on Flak, as pointed out by some of you in my comments of the previous video, but I want to give a huge shout out to Slowkey. He actually made a Flak build around this anointment where he spams a ton of these cyber spikes in seconds. I'll leave a link to his video in the pinned comment as well in case you want to check it out. Anyways, moving on, let's talk about how you can combine this cyber spike with other anointments. First, let's take a look at how the 50% elemental anointments would work in this situation. I'm going to equip this transformer that's going to give me 50% bonus incendiary damage. So basically, the way you're going to calculate this damage is the same way as you would calculate it in a normal situation. But there's something that's tricky about it. So you know how we increased our grenade damage to increase our tick damage from 272 to 340? And we also increased our splash damage by 20% to go from 128k to 154k. Well, unfortunately, this anointment is not going to be based off of that overall damage that we're doing with the splash damage and grenade bonuses. It's actually just going to be based off of the actual initial damage that we did. So it's going to be based off of 272 and 128k. So what we need to do is multiply both of those numbers by 0.5 to get half of those, and then apply the damage multiplier. And I'm going to be shooting flesh, and this happens to be incendiary, so it's 1.75, and I should be doing 238 as a constant ticking damage and 112k as the incendiary damage. So let's go ahead and use our anointment and test it against that guy over there. And explosion, there we go. So as you can see, if we get a little closer, there we go. We got 238 as the ticking damage and 112k back here right before the 154k as the actual explosion damage with that anointment. And just so you know, you can actually increase the damage done by the 50% elemental anointments by obviously increasing your elemental damage, or use special skills like for Amara, we got personal space. This will actually affect the elemental damage that we were doing. It's not going to affect the spike itself with the kinetic damage, but it is going to affect the damage that we were doing with our elemental bonuses. this combination of anointments can actually deal a pretty decent amount of damage provided you build around those bonuses. So anyways, let's move on, and this is actually even more interesting. Another anointment that can increase the damage dealt by the cyber spike is the broken 300% anointment on enemies above 90% health. And this is going to increase all the damage that you're doing. It's going to increase the kinetic damage from the spike itself. Any elemental bonuses that you have, they're all going to take this bonus. So the way you do this, you're going to want to activate your action skill with the cyber spike, and once that thing is in transit, you can switch out to a weapon with that anointment. And if the enemies are above 90% health, they should be taking an increase of 300% damage. So let's go ahead and show you. Let's go ahead and activate this, switch to the weapon with that bonus, and upon explosion, as you can see, we went from ticking 238 to 549, and we also went from 340 to 1360, which is a 300% increase. I mean, this anointment is just absolutely broken as it is, so it affects any source of damage, and that cyber spike can actually get some decent use out of that. Another thing I want to mention is that also in my previous video I mentioned that you can actually crit damage with the cyber spike, and the crit damage is going to do 4 times the damage. So if you get lucky with crits and combine it with this anointment, you're actually going to do some serious damage. Same with the Unforgiven. You can switch off to an Unforgiven and you'll get the 432% bonus of critical hit damage if your cyber spike is actually hitting critical hits. So really quick scenario, if I'm doing 154,000 as the normal explosion damage, let's say I actually hit a critical hit with that explosion. That would bring my damage to 600,000. And now let's increase that damage by 300% by swapping out to this weapon. That is almost 2.5 million damage. And what if you have this anointment on an Unforgiven? You also apply the 432% critical damage increase. And that just puts your cyber spike at around 12 million damage. Like I said, depending on how you build around this anointment, you can actually make it extremely viable. But anyways, we arrived to one final thing, and this is actually very awesome. It turns out that there's gonna be as many explosions as enemies being affected by the cyber spike at the given time. So the first explosion is obviously gonna be the cyber spike itself, and the rest of the explosions are going to be on the enemies that are currently being affected by it when it actually ends, which is actually awesome because if you shoot a group of enemies, they can all get hit 1, 2, or 3 times, obviously multiplying your damage depending on how many explosions they actually take. So quick example right here, I'm just going to throw my cyber spike. How many enemies are being affected? That's 4. You see that? 1, 2, 3, 4, and then the explosion from the actual cyber spike. So as you can see, there's many interesting things that this anointment is capable of. Many things you can do with it, and I bet you can make some very good use out of it with Moes if you increase your splash damage as much as possible. Also try increasing your elemental damage and getting some elemental damage bonuses as well. Going to increase your damage output with this cyber spike. And don't forget to also increase your splash damage radius in order for those explosions to hit as many enemies as many times as possible to maximize your damage. And for anyone questioning, yes, I'm currently working on a build with the actual cyber spike anointment, in which, let me spoiler alert here, I will be using Avatar to be able to use my action skill twice. And I'll use my action skill, and when it ends, I will activate the anointment. Obviously, the cyber spike will go out. I will tether them again with TZ bind, and then switch out to this before the explosion. And you already know what this does with TZ bind. It applies twice. So the damage that the spike is going to do, if I can combine it and time it properly, is going to be absolutely insane. So I cannot wait to make that video. But anyways, that's going to do it for me. If you guys found it helpful or informative in any way, a like rating is always appreciated. And if you want to subscribe for more Borderlands 3 content like this, that'll be awesome as well. Hope you all have an awesome rest of your day, and I'll see you guys on the next one. Peace out.